I like Nerdwriter. Short videos. They've really, really, really influenced me and my own video making and my own YouTube career. And I read his book, Escape into Meaning, and I have 2 of them. Let me show you. Let me prove to you that I have 2. There you go. Ugh. I can prove that I'm not a fake fan. I have 2 of them. The reason why I have 2 is because I bought one, and then I was like, hey, I'd like to be able to read it before it comes out, so that the day it comes out, I can do a review of it. And that way, it's, you know, the video is going to be relevant, and Evan, or Nerdwriter, is going to have a bit of publicity. So I DM'd Nerdwriter, said, hey, really big fan. Can I, would you mind if you don't mind, could you send me a book and I'll review it? Send me a copy of the book. And he did. He did send me a copy of the book. So we were talking on Instagram. He was really, really nice about it. Very easily accessible guy, and very, very, very generous and nice for sending me his book completely free. I did like the video. I did like the book as well. I liked it. I learned in it a lot of things that I didn't know. It's always great to have, you know, different angles for different subjects. It's inspiring for when you want to yourself make videos, right? Damn influencers wanting free handouts, and I got them, but I made sure that I didn't get a free handout. I got myself a second one. I only read one though, and then I wrote my review. And overall, this book was a pretty good book. I enjoyed reading it. It's a couple of essays that are very, very accessible. They're very diverse. It was a good read. I liked it. Perhaps the only issue I had with that book, and I gave it a lot of importance to that issue, was the fact that politically it was kind of lacking, in the sense that it seemed to me kind of incomplete and kind of stepping on eggshells. That's how I felt about it. And it's funny because he's very open about being, you know, not being religious, but he's definitely more on the left. But he doesn't seem to want to, for example, he will address consumerism instead of saying capitalism. He'll address systemic issues without actually naming the system, which I felt was frustrating. And I've been frustrated by that kind of rhetoric a lot, not only lately, but I have been for a very long time. And if you want, we can watch what I said, and I want to ask you guys if I thought I was a bit too harsh on Evan. Because sometimes I think I might have been too harsh. Maybe I wasn't. And Evan also answered really, really nice to answer a book, to answer a review. And we'll read the review as well. These biases made me appreciate the work even more. However, I also went into this book with a bias that would make me appreciate this book less. The essays I usually read are political essays, and more specifically, anti-capitalist essays. I've made it clear in the past that I'm an anarchist, so I went into this book as someone very critical of capitalism without expecting a critique of capitalism. However, there were many seeds of critiques of capitalism, though often incomplete. In I Think the Internet Wants to Be My Mind, Pushak criticizes not only Apple, but also the fossil fuel industry for essentially getting away with ruining the world for profits by convincing the world that social problems can be resolved through individual responsibility rather than collectively. However, when faced with the issue of profit-driven social media addiction, Nerdwriter hopes for some impressive people to design a new business model for the internet, as if business in itself wasn't the issue here. In The Comforts of Cyberpunk, Pushak says, "Cyberpunk turns those messy feelings into a place where it's no longer necessary to resist the splintering pressures of society because the fight's over and we lost. Who's we and who are we fighting? What are we fighting for? What was the fight?"
In Ode to Public Benches, one of my favorite essays by far, Pushak talks about how one of the beautiful aspects of public benches is that they aren't commodified. He also talks about how market forces ruined our cities and made them car dependent. He talks about gentrification, homelessness, and how hostile architecture cruelly harms the homeless without addressing the root causes of their predicament. In Jerry Seinfeld's Intangibles, Pushak almost condemns capitalism. Advertising and, by extension, capitalism only offers us a superficial happiness, and maybe that's not the most we could hope for, but it's not bad either. Superficial joys are still joys after all. They're pretty good, and pretty good is good enough.
So far, I guess, hopefully you understand that there's a lot of like political themes going on in this book. And of course, when you see, if it's going to be essays about culture, there's going to be some political insights at one point, right? Because you can't divorce society, culture from society, and you can't divorce society from politics. So there is politics in it. And my criticism of it was that, well, yeah, there's a lot of politics in it, but it feels like it's kind of shallow in its politics. There's not a like taking position firmly within these like political issues.
There's something strangely freeing about this perspective. We know consumerism and materialism are bad things. We are all hopelessly entangled in the system we criticize. That's a feature of global capitalism. The implication of everyone in a great number of morally messy activities. It can make you feel bewildered, impotent, guilty, apathetic, most of all, hypocritical. He ends this essay with an example of being better as, we could fight for a system that prioritizes people over profits and real relationships over transactional ones. This last essay on Seinfeld was the best criticism of capitalism in the book, and though capitalism often hides behind the words materialism and consumerism, that was good enough for me. Those were just some examples. Pushak points out many issues with capitalism, which is great, but fails to do anything with them. There's something frustrating about that. The reason as to why this is frustrating to me can be found in his fourth essay, When Experts Disagree. Pushak explains how his political...
Clunas says, maybe it's not just that the book did not have the content that you expected, but that its approach was too vague that, in order to evade conflict, builds almost empty arguments. And that's how I felt. And you'll see, like, I actually gave some really harsh words, because I also believe, and I agree with you, Clunas, that it might have been to evade conflict, right? Or to make the book as wide-ranging and as appealing to a broader base as possible, which that in itself is a capitalist tactic, right? It's market pressures being applied to your own thought or your arguments. But you'll see what I think about it. Here, the last this is the essay that I believe like really got under my skin for these reasons. It was When Experts Disagree.
Beliefs are very often informed by the opinion of experts. When it comes to climate change, he explains, he can agree with it because there's pretty much a scientific consensus on the subject. However, what if experts disagree? He gives the example of the idea of a $15 an hour federal minimum wage, which some experts think is a good idea and some others don't. He later goes on saying he believes in an increase in the federal minimum wage without specifying he'd like it to be $15 and says, "But can I say with certainty that this is the right thing to do? No, I can't. The best information I can gather on the question nudges me in one direction, but it isn't conclusive. Credible experts have divergent views. That's a stalemate I can't break, and as far as I can tell, neither can anyone else."
He's not done. Hold on.
Anybody speaking about this issue with complete conviction, from the President of the United States to your pal Gene from accounting, is either ignorant or dishonest. I've learned a lot in the last decade, but feel less sure than ever. It's bad timing. The world pleads for good people to stand behind their beliefs. I've become deeply skeptical of conviction in recent years, and much quieter at dinner parties as a result. at least when politics comes up.
And exactly, to add to Clunas's comment here, that the vague approach could be in order to evade conflict, but here, at least from what I understand, it's not to evade conflict, but it's also to avoid being wrong, or to have this perpetual skepticism about your beliefs, right? This having a lack of conviction because you don't know if you can be wrong or right about, what you advocate for. For example, if you advocate for the end of capitalism, you don't know if that's the right thing or not. It's impossible to predict the future, a capitalism less future. A post-capitalist society, a post-capitalist future is impossible to predict. So as long as you're not 100% sure, to him, that means that there is a skepticism and there might be a lack of conviction from that lack of certainty. So it may not only be to evade conflict, but it might also be to evade having opinions that are not 100% based on scientific facts or whatever.
And we can feel that skepticism, this hesitation to stand behind your beliefs. Reading this as someone who wants to radically change the world is so heartbreaking and almost frustrating. This might come off as harsh, but Evan seems, in a way, for a lack of a better term, politically castrated.
And I think that might have been a bit harsh. Calling him politically castrated. I don't know if that was warranted, honestly. I don't know if that was to just be bombastic or whatever. But I feel like calling someone politically castrated is I say for the lack of a better term, but I think there are a couple of better terms that you could have used, Mr. Canvas. Aside from calling Nerdwriter politically castrated. I went full Freud with that one. Neutered. Yeah, this it's a great term. It might be a great term, but yeah, I don't know. Guingia says, I feel that the issue with skepticism with your own beliefs is that it prevents most action that could be taken on behalf of those beliefs due to the fact that you'll second guess whatever actions would reflect those beliefs. Exactly. It's I'm gonna give my argument right after this as to why you should still have convictions without having without being entirely certain of the results of these convictions. Unmanned. And that's by the way, calling him politically castrated, I wasn't sure if using castrated was the right term, as in all right, because he got his balls chopped, does that mean he can't be politically engaged or whatever? But then I looked castrated definition. There is remove the testicles of a male animal or man, but there's also deprave of power, vitality, or vigor. The nation is a castrated giant, afraid to really punish subversives. So I took it as this, and not necessarily remove the testicles. So his power to change the world is taken away from his lack of wanting to act upon what he believes in fear of that what he believes in is wrong. Oh yeah, Alpac Attack says defanged might work a bit better. Yeah, defanged would have been better.
He's skeptical of conviction to the point of calling ignorant or dishonest people who defend a point of view with complete conviction without scientific consensus. At first, the need for scientific consensus to hold a conviction might seem like the most rational thing to do, but of course, the argument is faulty. I hope Evan watches this, and if you are, I'd love to know what you think. It's impossible to predict the future, obviously, so it can be very difficult, if not equally impossible, to predict the outcomes of a policy. Nobody can be certain of the exact outcomes of a policy, we can agree on that. But that's not what conviction is. Conviction is not being confident about knowing the outcomes of a policy or an idea. Conviction is being convinced that the risk of adopting this policy is worth taking. When my pal Gene from accounting has complete conviction for the $15 an hour federal minimum wage, he's not saying he knows with absolute certainty that it will be beneficial. Every policy or social change entails risks, and Gene thinks with complete conviction that the $15 an hour federal minimum wage is worth taking that risk. Gene looked at the data. He assessed the risks of a $15 an hour minimum wage. Then Gene looked around him, his family, his kids, his colleagues, and Gene asked himself, is it worth taking this assessed risk? Conviction is risk assessment. I think that saying people with conviction or certainty on unsettled issues are ignorant or dishonest, though mostly still good people, can come off as a bit pretentious. It also raises some red flags pertaining to technocracy. It might sound counterintuitive, but democratic decisions can't always be entirely based off expert opinions. When experts disagree, we don't shrug. We look at what the risks are, and if we judge that they're worth it, we go for it and we try it out. When we have conviction and we try to convince others to vote for a proposal, we're not trying to convince them that this proposal is 100% right and that virtually all experts agree on it. If that was the case, nothing would change because it's impossible to do. What we are doing is convincing them to take a risk to improve our lives. Evan comes off as someone who doesn't want to take any risk, perhaps out of fear of being wrong and misleading the people he loves, and I completely understand that, but as long as we can't predict the future, politics will remain that, taking risks. To some, the $15 an hour federal minimum wage is a risk worth taking. To others, it's not. And then there are some people that can't make up their minds because, after looking at the research, experts disagree. However, aside from that, I really...
Hey, that guy's spitting facts. Yeah, I'm not gonna repeat. That was a scripted. It was scripted, and I wrote it. I couldn't say it better because I scripted it. Kluna says the kind of skepticism is that one of the rookie that has just started to go through the journey of searching for their own system of beliefs. I don't know if that is Evan's situation, but it seems so. Now, I don't want to. It could be. I don't want to be like kind of. Evan has more experience than me in everything. I don't want to go there and be kind of condescending and be, all right, you're just at the beginning of your journey to looking for your own system of beliefs. Join me, become an anarchist, Evan, and join me on this pedestal, and that way you can experiment with this system of belief. But I understand that, yeah, it kind of looks like that, right? The kind of person who, and as I said, it's fine to not be sure of which, of not being sure which system of beliefs you want to adhere to, or which convictions you want to fight for. But yeah, I think it's about assessing risks. I think it's a good way to think about it. I'm against capitalism. Do I know for certain 100% that once capitalism is done and over with, that everything's going to be better? I don't. I can't know that. It's impossible to know that. However, I have the conviction that not only it will be better, but that we should take risks to abolish capitalism and come up with a better system altogether. I'm a rookie too. That's why I kind of get it, but maybe I'm just projecting. Yeah, I mean that kind of skepticism is a good way to start, right? Because if you're skeptical, you also have to be skeptical of the system in which you are you are evolving within as well, right? If you're going to be skeptical about is I don't know, is the $15 minimum wage or federal minimum wage, is that good? Well, you also have to check, you also have to be skeptical of, is what's the current federal minimum wage in the US? It's $7.25. Is the $7.25, can you also be skeptical that this is the right thing to do? Yeah. So you gotta be skeptical not only of new proposals, but of the status quo as well. And Evan answered. We're gonna read it. I want to see what, because I don't remember. But, wow, Sean, I really could have not asked for more with this review. When you work on something for over a year, all you want is for people to engage with it generously and thoughtfully. That's what you did here. I love that you enjoyed the essays, especially the Emerson one. I think that's my favorite too. And your criticism are smart and well taken. In fact, what you said about conviction has helped me think through some stuff. One expert disagrees is the expression of an insecurity, something I think I needed to articulate so I could start building my politics, which can be a long process. At the time of writing the book, I was only confident enough to express the insecurity, but as you picked up from fragments in the other essays, I imagine our politics overlap in many places. Again, thank you so much for reading and engaging with. It's called Escape into Meaning. Yeah, sorry. As I say in the friendship essay, I wrote the book, but I don't make it. The reader and writer make it together. Cheers for that. How fucking wholesome. How fucking wholesome. And then I read that, I'm like, well, what did I call him? What did I call him? Politically castrated. No. Why did I do that? Shame. But as he says, yeah, he's in as Clunas like rightfully predicted. He said he's in the process. Needed to articulate that to start building his politics, which can be a long process. And I completely understand that, of course, and I think it's good that he was able to talk about that. And perhaps, you know, it's a starting point. You said he was castrated. I think defanged would have been better. I think defanged would have been much better, because castrated is castrated is much more like insulting than to say like defanged, right? Defanged is more, it's a little evocative. Defanged is probably the right term. If I had to redo this today, I would say defanged. Because I feel like if you're someone who wants to be in politics but doesn't want to be aggressive or doesn't want to, you know, to rattle the cage too much, being defanged would be fine by your standards, right? Like if I was to tell Joe Biden that, hey, Joe Biden, you're politically defanged. I feel like you don't have the energy or whatever to really change the system as it needs to be changed. And he'll look at me, an anarchist, and be like, yeah, I am defanged, I guess. Whatever. Get the fuck out of my house. However, if I told him he was castrated, I don't think that's the kind of thing that, you know, it can't be like agreed on. Like, nobody wants to be castrated. But some people, I guess, don't care about being defanged because they don't want to use the fangs. But being politically castrated, maybe perhaps you still want to use your creative energy, I guess. 2 a.m. in Washington, D.C., Sean leaning over Joe Biden's bed. Joe, you're defanged. Maybe castrated in this case would be better. But in the case of Nerdwriter, who's genuinely like a good faith actor, who's just expressing a like concern and insecurity about politics, it's not to the point of like being castrated. I think it's defanged would have been a better way to go about it. Yeah, it depends on your opponent which weapons to use, as Clunas says. I agree. So that was Nerdwriter's answer, which was such an a great answer, which really touched me to the point of saying, what you said about conviction has helped me think through some stuff, which was like, really? Me? And he also said, so I answered, hey, Evan, you have no idea how much your message means to me. It really moved me and my partner. I can testify. After further reflection, when experts disagree, though I disagreed with it, was one of the essays that had me the most engaged. It forced me to revisit my thoughts and question myself. What are convictions? And how can I affirm my position on a policy without misleading or without giving myself a semblance of authority on the subject? I think one of the strengths of your book is that you may make yourself vulnerable in many essays, and one of the ways you do that is through articulating your insecurities. The more I think of it, the more When Experts Disagree is becoming my favorite essay. Seeing it not as a conclusion of a political journey, but as the beginning, makes me appreciate it a lot more. There's a sense of urgency in my politics, the effects of capitalism on climate change, on people's mental health and well-being, and I believe this sense of urgency is justified, but I can't blame anyone for being responsible and not going head first in major reforms or revolutions. If anything, if someone can feel this urgency and act on it after careful considerations, after facing their own insecurity on the topic, and after examining the consequences and the risks of their positions, these positions won't only be more clear, but better understood, not as certainties, but as convictions. I must be rambling at this point. I might be rambling at this point. Thank you so much for writing this book, and thank you even more for giving such an amazing answer to my review. There you go. It went very well, despite the insult. Honestly, very, very honestly, I'm looking forward, if there's going to be a second book, to read what it has to say about his political takes. I think after this, I was sent a Pushak Escape into Meaning. I think it was the Washington Post, because he's thinking of his œuvre, of course. That's the hard to pronounce French word for body of work, writes Evan Pushak. Œuvre is not that hard to pronounce, okay? French is not, well, okay, maybe French is hard because it's so refined. I remember them commenting on the politics of the book. There you go. Pushak, a graduate of Boston University's film school, is at his best when critiquing film, art, and literature. His attempts at tackling politics or economics, as he does in his uncharacteristically amorphous essay When Experts Disagree, are less successful. That's it. That's what we get for the politics. So whoever wrote this, who is it? Oliver James Campbell agrees with me. So I'm excited to see how this journey that he admittedly was starting through insecurity, how it's evolved since that video. It's only been a year or so, even less than a year. So we'll see. I'm looking forward to that second book, perhaps in a couple of years or a couple of months. And to answer the question, do I regret being so harsh on Nerdwriter? Yeah, I do. I think I could have been more charitable and more understanding of his position, even though I didn't really know it. However, perhaps using flamboyant terms such as politically castrated might have helped, not only me in terms of getting that off my chest, because it's not just Nerdwriter, it's a lot of people who, as who was it, the Sneaky Revenant or Halitosis, the ABC, halitosis. Following the ABCs, you can talk about anything but capitalism. So yeah, so it's maybe talking about maybe this is a reflection of me being angry about you can talk about anything but capitalism. But with Evan's answer, I think I was a bit too rough. But in any case, it's a good book. Check it out if you ever feel like it.